Joe Masseria. Joe Masseria, known as Joe the Boss, rose to prominence during Prohibition by consolidating control over bootlegging, gambling, and protection rackets in New York. He projected himself as capo di tutti capi, the boss of bosses, demanding tribute from other mafia leaders. His reign was marked by the Castellamarese War, a violent struggle against rival Salvatore Maranzano for dominance over New York's underworld. Masseria's leadership style reflected the old-world mafia, rigid, autocratic, and reliant on brute force. But his methods attracted police attention and cut into profits, leading younger figures like Charles "Lucky" Luciano to view him as a liability. Luciano envisioned a more modern and business-oriented syndicate, where alliances could extend beyond Sicilian traditions, to include Jewish partners like Meyer Lansky and Benjamin Bugsy Siegel. On April 15, 1931, Masseria was betrayed. Luciano lured him to Nuova Villa Tamaro, a Coney Island restaurant, under the pretense of lunch. During the meal, Luciano excused himself to the restroom, a signal for the gunmen waiting outside. Albert Anastasia, Vito Genovese, Joe Adonis, and Siegel stormed in with pistols. Masseria was shot multiple times in the head and back, collapsing over the table. His assassination ended the Castellamarese War and signaled a generational shift. With Masseria gone, the door was open for a reorganization of the American Mafia, moving away from the single boss of bosses system toward Luciano's commission, which governed through collective decision-making. Salvatore Maranzano. Salvatore Maranzano emerged as Joe Masseria's chief rival during the Castellamarese War. Born in Sicily, he carried with him the old-world traditions of Cosa Nostra, combining ruthless enforcement with the structure of a military strategist. After Masseria's death, Maranzano declared victory and reorganized the New York underworld. He formally established the five families: Luciano, Mangano, Galliano, Profaci, and his own, and positioned himself as capo di tutti capi, the boss of bosses. Maranzano's vision mirrored feudal Sicily. He demanded absolute loyalty and tribute from other bosses, and openly disdained Luciano's vision of a modern, profit-driven syndicate that welcomed non-Italian allies. He further alienated potential supporters by plotting to eliminate Luciano and his close associates. To carry out this plan, he brought in Irish gangster Vincent Mad Dog Call as outside muscle. Luciano acted before Maranzano could strike. On September 10, 1931, 4 men entered Maranzano's office in Manhattan's Helmsley Building, posing as federal agents. Their disguises caught his guards off guard, and Call fled. Once inside, the intruders pinned Maranzano down. He was stabbed repeatedly in the chest and face, strangled, and then shot multiple times at close range to ensure death. The killing was swift and surgical, carried out under the guise of a law enforcement raid to confuse witnesses and avoid immediate suspicion. With Maranzano eliminated, Luciano abolished the boss of bosses position altogether, replacing it with the Commission, a governing body designed to settle disputes and prevent power struggles from spiraling into destructive wars. Maranzano's assassination marked the end of the old Sicilian style of mafia leadership in America. It demonstrated that no single figure, no matter how powerful, was immune to removal if he threatened the collective interests of organized crime. Albert Anastasia. Albert Anastasia rose to power as one of the most feared killers in American organized crime. A founding member of the syndicate known as Murder Inc., he was personally linked to dozens of murders and ordered many more. His brutality earned him the nickname Lord High Executioner. By the mid-1950s, Anastasia had become boss of what is now the Gambino crime family, controlling rackets in New York's waterfront, garment district, and construction unions. Anastasia's leadership style was marked by volatility. He was known for sudden outbursts of violence and an inability to tolerate even minor acts of defiance. In one infamous case, he ordered the death of a young man simply for stealing a television set from a truck without permission. These unpredictable actions eroded trust within the mafia's upper ranks. His growing alliance with Frank Costello, the head of the Luciano family, further alienated ambitious rivals like Vito Genovese and Carlo Gambino. By 1957, Anastasia's recklessness had made him too dangerous to the Commission. A decision was made to remove him and shift power to Gambino, a more calculating and reliable leader. On October 25, 1957, Anastasia entered the Park Sheraton Hotel in Manhattan for his regular haircut. While seated in the barber's chair with a towel over his face, 2 masked gunmen rushed in. They fired multiple rounds into Anastasia, who in a moment of confusion reportedly lunged at his own reflection in the barber's mirror before collapsing to the floor. The killing was a textbook mob hit, quick, public, and final. It demonstrated the Mafia's ability to eliminate even its most violent enforcer when his unpredictability threatened profits and stability. Carlo Gambino assumed control of Anastasia's crime family, setting the stage for decades of dominance under a more restrained and business-oriented leadership. Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld, rose to power not through brute force but through political influence. A close ally of Lucky Luciano, Costello built his empire on gambling, slot machines, and strong connections to Tammany Hall politicians. His ability to bribe and negotiate allowed him to keep law enforcement at bay and ensured steady profits for his organization. By the late 1940s, he controlled the Luciano crime family, one of the most powerful in New York. Costello's strength was also his vulnerability. His reliance on political connections and public visibility made him a target for rivals who favored a more traditional, violent approach to leadership. Vito Genovese, an ambitious underboss, viewed Costello as weak and too cautious. Genovese sought complete control of the family and orchestrated a plan to remove him permanently. On May 2nd, 1957, Costello returned to his apartment building on Central Park West. As he entered the lobby, Vincent the Chin Gigante, acting on Genovese's orders, confronted him and fired a shot. The bullet grazed Costello's head, leaving him injured but alive. Though he survived the attempt, the message was unmistakable. His life was no longer safe within the organization. Shaken by the attack and weary of constant power struggles, Costello chose to retire rather than retaliate. He relinquished control of the family to Genovese, effectively ending his reign. The Luciano family was soon renamed the Genovese family, reflecting the shift in power. Costello's fall demonstrated how even leaders who thrived through influence and diplomacy could not escape the violence that underpinned mafia politics. His survival of the hit underscored the strategic nature of mob assassinations. Sometimes the threat and the message mattered more than the kill itself. Vito Genovese rose through the ranks of the American Mafia with ruthless ambition. Originally an ally of Lucky Luciano, he positioned himself as underboss of the Luciano family before fleeing to Italy in the 1930s to avoid prosecution. There, he thrived by collaborating with Mussolini's regime and expanding narcotics connections. After the war, Genovese returned to New York, determined to seize full control of the family. Genovese orchestrated the downfall of Frank Costello in 1957, using Vincent Gigante to carry out the failed assassination that forced Costello into retirement. He then aligned with Carlo Gambino to eliminate Albert Anastasia later that year. With rivals removed, Genovese became boss of what was renamed the Genovese crime family, the most powerful of New York's 5 families. His reign, however, was short-lived. Genovese aggressively pushed the mafia deeper into heroin trafficking, a move that drew intense law enforcement scrutiny. In 1957, he convened the Appalachian Meeting in upstate New York, a gathering of more than 100 mob leaders intended to solidify his authority. Instead, police raided the meeting, exposing the national scale of organized crime to the public and law enforcement, an unprecedented disaster for the mafia. By 1959, Genovese's enemies sought to neutralize him permanently. Luciano, Lansky, and Costello, who had long resented his betrayals, reportedly conspired to frame him. Genovese was convicted of narcotics trafficking and sentenced to 15 years in prison. While serving his sentence in Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, he continued to exert influence, but his health declined. In 1969, he died in custody, with persistent rumors that he had been deliberately poisoned to prevent his return to power. Genovese's fall illustrated how ambition, overreach, and betrayal destabilized mafia leadership. His drive to control the American underworld ultimately backfired, and his downfall reinforced the mafia's unwritten rule. Power was never absolute, and alliances could dissolve into deadly retribution. Joe Gallo. Joe Gallo, known as Crazy Joe, was a volatile figure in the Colombo crime family. Rising during the 1950s and 1960s, he gained a reputation for unpredictability and violence. Unlike traditional mobsters, Gallo cultivated connections with African-American gangs in Harlem and styled himself as an outsider willing to challenge mafia traditions. His charisma and willingness to defy established bosses made him both dangerous and difficult to control. Gallo's criminal career was marked by extortion, loan sharking, and contract killings. He was implicated in the attempted assassination of Colombo boss Joseph Profaci during the family's internal war in the early 1960s. After serving a decade in prison, Gallo returned to the streets in 1971 with renewed ambition. He cultivated celebrity connections, frequenting Manhattan nightclubs and earning admiration from writers and actors who saw him as a rebellious figure. This public persona masked the reality of escalating tensions. Colombo family leadership, now under Joseph Colombo, viewed Gallo as a destabilizing threat. After Colombo was shot in 1971 and left incapacitated, suspicions arose that Gallo had orchestrated the attack to weaken the boss and position himself for power. Whether true or not, his reputation as a reckless agitator sealed his fate. On April 7, 1972, his 43rd birthday, Joe Gallo attended a late-night celebration at Umberto's Clam House in Little Italy. Around 4:30 a.m., a gunman entered the restaurant and opened fire. Gallo was struck multiple times in front of his family and staggered outside before collapsing on the sidewalk. Witnesses described chaos as patrons fled the scene. The hit was widely attributed to the Colombo family, carried out to eliminate a rival whose flamboyance and disobedience threatened their control. His murder was symbolic. An unpredictable outlaw cut down in the very neighborhood where the Mafia maintained its grip on power. Paul Castellano. Paul Castellano, nicknamed Big Paul, rose to prominence as the boss of the Gambino crime family following the death of Carlo Gambino in 1976. Castellano focused heavily on white-collar crimes, expanding the family's control over construction, trucking, and labor unions. He also emphasized racketeering and loan sharking, prioritizing business-like operations over traditional street-level violence. His mansion on Staten Island symbolized both his wealth and his detachment from the rank-and-file soldiers of his family. Despite his power, Castellano's leadership alienated many within the Gambinos. His refusal to attend crew meetings and his disdain for drug dealing, while quietly allowing profits to flow to his own circle, bred resentment. John Gotti, an ambitious capo from Queens, viewed Castellano as both hypocritical and vulnerable. When Castellano faced a federal indictment for racketeering in the mid-1880s, his position weakened further, creating an opening for Gotti. On December 16, 1985, Castellano was scheduled to attend a meeting at Sparks Steakhouse in Midtown Manhattan. As he exited his car with underboss Thomas Bellotti, a team of Gotti's gunmen, disguised in trench coats, moved in. In a matter of seconds, they fired multiple shots, killing both Castellano and Bellotti on the sidewalk in front of stunned bystanders. Gotti observed the hit from a car parked nearby, ensuring the plan unfolded precisely. The assassination was one of the most public mob hits in American history, carried out in broad daylight on a busy Manhattan street. Its brazenness sent shockwaves through law enforcement and the Mafia alike. For Gotti, it was the final step in seizing control of the Gambino family, which he did shortly afterward. Castellano's death marked a turning point. It demonstrated that even the most business-oriented boss, with wealth and influence, could be violently overthrown if he lost the confidence of his subordinates. The hit propelled Gotti into the spotlight as the new Teflon Don, ushering in a more flamboyant but equally dangerous era of Mafia leadership. Carmine Galante. Carmine Galante, often called Lilo, was one of the most feared Mafia bosses of his era. Rising through the Bonanno crime family, he built his reputation as a ruthless enforcer during Prohibition and the 1930s. By the 1970s, Galante had seized control of the Bonanno family, expanding its power through narcotics trafficking. He became the dominant figure in the French Connection, smuggling vast quantities of heroin from Europe into the United States. His wealth and ambition made him one of the most powerful and dangerous Mafia leaders in the country. Galante's approach to leadership was marked by arrogance and brutality. He sidelined traditional commission oversight and declared himself untouchable, even boasting that, "No one can touch me." His decision to monopolize heroin profits, refusing to share proceeds with other families, bred resentment across the American Mafia. Both the Gambino and Genovese families viewed him as a destabilizing threat whose actions risked federal crackdowns on all organized crime operations. On July 12, 1979, Galante dined at Joe and Mary's Italian-American restaurant in Bushwick, Brooklyn. He sat on the patio with his bodyguards and associates, enjoying a cigar after lunch. Around 2 p.m., 3 masked gunmen entered the restaurant's courtyard. In a rapid burst of gunfire, they shot Galante in the chest and head, killing him instantly. His bodyguards, rather than defending him, reportedly stepped aside, signaling that the hit had been sanctioned at the highest levels. The aftermath was unforgettable. Galante's lifeless body, cigar still clenched between his teeth, became one of the most iconic images in Mafia history. The photograph captured the stark reality of mob politics. Loyalty lasted only as long as power, and even the most feared boss could be eliminated with approval from the commission. Galante's death restored balance within the New York Mafia by removing a leader who had overstepped traditional boundaries. It also reinforced the unwritten rule that no single boss could seize total control of lucrative rackets without consequence. His assassination was not just a killing. It was a collective decision by rival families to preserve the stability of organized crime. Congrats on making it to the end. If you like this video, please show your support by hitting the like and subscribe button.